Hey there, and welcome on back. As always, I'm Carl with Targets with Attitude, as my professor for knives and all things sharp. So I'm back, grab your pens and paper, class is about to begin. Day? Well, it's Monday, so it's my basics, what you really need to know. We're going to take a look at knife grinds. Yes, knife grinds. What do we mean when we say Scandi Grind? What's a hollow grind? All pretty basic, but it's also something that confuses a lot of people who are new to the world of knives or knife collecting. But before we get into the details, let's get a little bit of syllabus work out of the way, shall we? If you're new to the channel, welcome. Here on Mondays, we do knife basics, what you really need to know. We answer questions for those who are new to the world of knives and knife collecting, and go over a few things for those who have been in it for a while that you may have forgotten. On Fridays, we do various reviews of various knives. Occasionally, I'll review a piece of camping gear or survival gear, flashlights, camping equipment, cooking gear, that sort of thing. But mainly knives. For those of you who have been with us for a while, welcome back. Got just one question for you, and yes, you know what it is. Have you subscribed yet? Yeah, I'm looking at you right there in St. Louis, right in the middle. I mean, come on, man. It's so simple. Just hit that button right down there. It says subscribe. Then you hit the bell next to it. That way you get notified every time I put up a neat new video. Win-win situation. You win because you don't miss any of my videos. I win because, well, the more subscribers I have, the easier it is to get all these neat new things. But, on with class. Today, we're talking about knife grinds, as I said, which means mainly looking straight down the blade, which is a little difficult in live person. So, just like the one we did last week, we're going to Professor's favorite little helper, PowerPoint, or in my case, Keynote. Same thing, just different varieties. So, let's see what we can do here for you. Okay, so let's take a look here. Knife grinds. Yeah, I know, I really need to work on my titles, don't I? But we'll work on it. And I just realized I misspelled knife. What a thing for a professor to do. Well, let's go on here. Now, first thing you have to realize, most knives will have a primary bevel and a secondary bevel. In this case, I'm demonstrating a flat grind. As you can see, the edges of the primary bevel are nice and flat, and they go all the way down to where the secondary bevel starts, and secondary bevel forms your actual cutting edge. To be a flat grind, technically it has to start all the way up at the spine. You'll have some people talk about a standard grind or normal grind, which technically doesn't exist, but they'll talk about it anyway. So in that case, you've got a little bit of blade above where the primary bevel starts, normally less than a quarter of the blade in thickness. I'll explain why this is a little controversial later here when we get to a different type of grind. But, let's say, this is your standard typical grind. Most common grind you'll see, especially on most of the traditional pocket knives. You will occasionally see a full flat grind. In this case, primary bevel goes all the way down to the cutting edge. There's no secondary bevel on it. This can form a very, very sharp edge. Tends to be found more on very thin knives. Spyderco is famous for having some full flat grind knives, and they are sharp as a tack. Forms a razor edge without any problems. You'll also see it on several specialty cutting or excuse me, cooking knives. Japanese are famous for this, especially on sushi knives. Again, very thin blades, very sharp, and cuts beautifully. The only problem is that since the spine has to be fairly thin to get a good sharp edge, or extremely wide, you end up with either a cleaver-like blade, or you get a blade that's thin enough it's easily damaged. That's not always true, but it is a good general rule. And so you won't find the full flat grind on most knives out there. There are some, but they're kind of uncommon. What's more common, especially nowadays, and especially on camping knives, hunting knives, and that sort of thing, is what's called a hollow grind. As you can see with this, your primary bevel is curved inwards in a concave shape. What this does is it allows you to have a nice thick spine that narrows down beautifully at the start of the secondary bevel, so that you've still got the strength from a thick spine, but you don't have the thickness at the start of the secondary bevel that makes the knife hard to cut with. This is great for, as I say, hunting and camping knives, because it gives you a good strong knife that cuts beautifully. And they're starting to find their way, well, no, not starting, they have found their way into pocket knives in a lot of cases. I will admit that most of my favorite knives are hollow grind. Just, it's period cutting. Similar to the hollow grind would be the convex grind. Excuse me. Again, the bevel is curved, but it's curved out instead of in. And I'll be honest, you'll see this primarily for the secondary bevel. Truthfully, the only knife I've ever seen where the primary bevel was a convex grind, it was a double-edged dagger. I'm not saying that the knives aren't out there. I'm sure someone has made one. Some of you may even have it in your one or two in your collection. But I have not personally seen them. The advantage of the convex grind is that it packs more metal or steel into your blade, so that you've got the strength all the way down to cutting edge. It also doesn't wear away as fast, or at least in my experience it doesn't, so it'll tend to keep it edge a little bit longer and be a little bit tougher when it comes to cutting. Matter of fact, most of my knives I've gone ahead and put a convex grind on secondary bevel because it just works so well for me. Going on, we've got the Saber Grind. Now this is where I was talking about the slight controversy. Depending on who you talk to, some say a Saber Grind is any knife where you've got a flat section forming the cheek or flat of the knife up near the spine, coming down to your primary bevel and or secondary bevel. Many books will insist that to be a true Saber Grind, you can't have a secondary bevel. It has to be the primary bevel all the way down to the cutting point. Some will also insist that for it to be a true Saber Grind, at least half to 2/3 of the blade must form the cheek or flat. Personally, I think they're getting a little picky on that point, but some books will insist that. The advantage of a Saber Grind is that it gives you more strength up near the top, near the spine, so yeah, it's going to give you a stronger knife. Similar to Saber Grind, what's called a Scandi Grind. Scandi Grind was originally found mainly on Scandinavian knives. Some of the old Viking knives had this, where the knife was straight down to the cutting edge, where the primary bevel would take place instead of the secondary bevel on other knives. This gives you a very wide cheek or face, gives you the same thickness of the spine all the way down to where it starts to narrow for the cutting edge. So basically a very strong blade, but it also tends to be a much heavier blade because you do have that full thickness of metal. It also has another disadvantage in that if the blade is too thick at the spine, you can start having problems using it for anything other than chopping, because the blade ends up just too thick to really slice with. But as long as your blade isn't so thick that it's reduced to nothing more than a chopper, this can give you a very, very strong knife. The only real drawback, as I said, is it can't be too thick, and it tends to be heavier than other knives. Final grind we're going to go over is something of a specialty grind. This one you'll only see on certain specialty knives, especially ones that are designed more for scraping than cutting. I have seen this used on some kitchen knives. It's a chisel grind. And just like a wood chisel or a metal chisel, you'll have the blade completely flat on one side and your bevel to the cutting edge is only on the other side. It doesn't form for both. The advantage of this is that, as I say, it's very good for scraping type cuts. Say you're trying to remove a hide from a deer or something. This will be excellent for that. You're trying to thin down a piece of leather. Again, excellent. More likely to see this, though, on tools like, say, a plane, or, as the name implies, a chisel. Plane is, for those of you who don't know woodworking, is designed to shave off the top of a piece of wood to thin it down or flatten it out very quickly. And since you're trying to shave it or scrape it, this is the type of grind you're going to see on it. So, there you have it. Those are your primary grinds. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Hope it gave you a little bit of information that you may not have had before. Sorry, I hate fall. As you can tell, I'm trying to lose my voice. But this gives you a little bit more understanding of what we're talking about when we start describing knives. Now you're not going to be confused when someone starts talking about a hollow grind or convex grind or flat grind. And hopefully it gives you a bit more understanding and a bit more appreciation for our shared hobby. In the meantime, I wish you great collecting. I'll leave you with a couple videos right over here that I think you'll find quite interesting. And as always, you can hit this target over here to subscribe. I hope you do. We'll see you next time. Take care and keep on collecting.